with this. So first thing that we had done was we had created a model, right? We had created a model, and the model contained details about whatever data that you wanted to add. Currently, a model doesn't have any methods in there, but we are going to add methods to this shortly. That's the first thing that we did. The second thing that we did was we added a controller. So let me add a controller again and showed you what we did out here. And the type of controller we added was the MVC controller with read-write actions. Okay. And let's call this EMS controller instead of employees controller. And how did we generate all the code? I mean, this code came in generated by itself, correct? So you had all these were the templated code that was generated for you. And you had 5 different methods that we, basically wrote code for. Tell me one by one what each of them is doing. Index does what? What does it typically do? Shows you what?
List.
A list of all the, yes, the template that you use is list. And basically it shows you a list of all the, objects that you have out there. Okay. The second one was details, where you're actually giving in a single, ID. Based on the ID, you're picking up a single record and showing that. Then we had create, which actually had 2 methods. There was a get and there was a post. Okay. So if you don't give any attribute, by default, it takes it as a get. And we discussed at length how, initially when you first go to that page, there's a get happening on that page. The page is initially shown blank. The user fills in the values and then does a post. And that post then is, received here. While receiving it here, there are 2 ways that in fact, 3 ways that we talked about of receiving the data that is the user has entered on that form. So first possibility was with form collection. The second possibility was with model binding. And the third possibility was individually you'll have to give in variable names, control names here, individually, one by one, and you can actually read the values. And of the 3, the one that we said would work, the best was with model binding. So that's how we are reading the values in here. Same thing with edit, right? The difference in edit and create was edit would also show you the initial values. And in delete, initially show the values, and finally in the post for delete, when he submits the value based on the ID that you have, delete the record from the database. That's what we want to do, right? So I'm not sure whether you'll have tried this out because you're all in that exam frenzy, right? And if you have, are there any questions that you want to ask me? This is the code that we had actually written for all of this. Is there anything that you want to ask me before we begin? Any questions related to any of this? Okay. So can I quickly see a message from you all about how many of you have completed this example as is with what we have done last? No changes in there or whatever. This example, how many of you have completed? Can I just see a yes or a no or whatever, done, not done, whatever the case might be? Done with database also. Areva, Nikhil, well done. Done it with the Nikhil. I'm reconfirming. You've done this one with the database.
Yes, sir. So instead of using list, I directly use the methods which we used previously.
Okay, but you wrote the method in here only.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so you didn't do it in the model class. That's the only thing, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, good. But
in the controller only, I wrote that method.
Okay, good. I'm happy that you tried it out. You took the initiative and you tried it out. Okay. So we got about 15, 20 names, maybe those who have done it, or probably less than 20 names. But this would have been useful if you had done it, because now what I'm going to ask you to do is the next section, which is get it working with the database itself. All right. So I'm presuming that the people who had to say yes have said yes, and everybody else is a no. So let me show you what we've done here. We actually had created a list, which was a hard-coded list, and that list then was being passed to the view, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually show you a finished example where instead of doing it this way, what is the finished code, so to say, how would it actually look with the changed code? But I'm not going to show you the code directly. You're going to tell me what I need to do. So first thing, what would this code need to do to, instead of hard-coded values, to read from the database? What would you need to do in here? Nikhil has written the code here, but we don't want that. What would you do instead? How would you get this code to work? Where would you get these values from? Where would this list take its values from? Yes. Where do all these values come in from? We said what, I mean, in the first session out here, we have said that what is the job of the controller? What are the two things that the controller interacts with? First is the model and the view. So what does it do with the model and what does it do with the view? Yes.
The model
Take
can
data from like class.
Correct. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to write code in the model which is returning your data. So something like this, for example, employee rather dot get all employees, for example. Okay. So I don't have that method. I have a class called model, but I don't have any method there called get all employees. So instead of hard coding the values here, this method of yours, which says get all employees, would need to return a list of employees. Are we clear on this, everybody? And this method will be written where? Where are we writing this now? In the employee class. So we could actually write that method here. And what will be the logic in that employee class? What code would it use out there? What code would it use out there? What code would it do to return to you a list of employees which have been read from the database? Yes, please help me. How do I get all these employees? What do I need to use? What do I need to do? What will be the code in that method is my question to you.
First, it will be the database connection code.
Correct. So let's say we open the database connection. Then what? Open. Then what? What
Then we
statement?
fetch
The connection.
Yeah, open the connection, create the command, statement in the command, your SQL in the command would be what? Select staff from employees, because we want all the employees. So let's say we have done that. Next, what? How do I read all the values?
so
I
you
want
can
to read
use
all
a
the
data reader.
Data reader.
correct.
Reader.
I'll have to use a data reader, right?
And every time we are reading it, we can add that to list.
Correct. So every time you read a record from your data reader, you'll need to read the value and keep adding it into a list. And at the end of the code, you close the data reader, close the connection, and the end of the code simply return that list out here. So this is how you would get it. So you don't need to do all the hard-coded values here. You are now getting this value which returns you all the values. Are we clear on this, everybody? So this is the line of code that you'll need to change out here and get it working. What is the second thing that you'll need to do? Instead of picking up all employees, now what is this code doing?
Detail of one single object.
Right. So how would you change this line of code? Can you help me with what would this look like if you took a sort of clue from the first one, what will this now be? Employee object is equal to what?
Employee dot get single. Oh, employee
Employee dot
get single employee.
get single employee. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you had written a method like this. You had already written a method like this. I had asked you to
Yes,
write a
sir.
method,
Yes, yes.
Yes.
right? And what did this take as a parameter? It took an employee
An
number as a
user ID.
parameter. So now if I get the ID from somewhere, that ID now can be passed out here. All right. Okay, now I would like you to visualize and tell me, you all have already done some CRUD operations. You know this code well, hopefully. What would the code in there be? Essentially, again, create the connection, create the command. Give me the SQL statement in there. What will that SQL statement be?
Select star from
Select star
employee where,
from employee.
Select star from employees, but this time
where
where
employee ID is equals to @employee ID.
employee number is equal to @employee number. Now, two possibilities exist. Either it was found or it was not found. If it was found, then read the value from your data reader and add it to a single object this time, not to a collection of objects. And if not found, return a null. So if I now get a null here, what could I do in my code? If obj is null, what could I do? Yes. If it's not there, then what? Two possibilities: either do a not found, either return a not found, or send a message from the controller to the view, right? By using the view bag and display the value in there, saying that no such employee record present. So do it either one of the two, either throwing an HTTP status code or individually giving out a message saying that no such employee exists. But essentially that's what you're going to be doing. And if the employee was found, then the same employee object being passed to the view. Are we clear on the code for get single employee?
Yes, sir.
But sir, our UI is not made for a custom input.
Sorry.
Our where we are clicking on a detail, we have not made it for like custom input, so it will give bad error or bad request.
No, why do you need custom in this thing? This is coming from the URL. No? ID
Yes,
is
sir,
coming
but
from the
we
URL.
have in our UI what we have made, we have given a button for each employee.
No, we haven't.
Details.
No. You don't remember the UI. I'll show you the UI. You don't remember what we've done out there. This code we had already done the other day. So if you ran it with details, again here index is not working. So let me run it as it is with hard-coded values. Okay, so I see what you're saying, that you're anyway going to go there from the value there. But my point being this, what if we give the URL directly? Then what will happen? I understood.
Then it will create.
Yeah, now I understood what you're saying. So what his point was that to go to the details page, you're anyway doing what? You're clicking on this and you're pretty sure that this is working fine. But what if, for example, this given a value which is not there? So I'm asking you to take care of that situation, because not necessary that if it's a part of the URL that is always coming from a button here. This could also be coming in from some other broken link somewhere. Okay. So I'm asking you to take care of that situation. Right. But point taken. All right. So this is what you could do. Okay, I'll keep it back to the way it was earlier. I mean, otherwise it'll keep giving me compilation errors. So this is what you could do out here. Now the code for details matches the code for a couple of others. What are the other two which are similar to details?
Update.
Which one? Edit? You mean edit? Edit has two of them. So be specific. It has a get and a post, both. It has two methods. The edit has two methods. It has a get and a post. So which one is it that we are talking about?
Get.
The get. So the same code that you wrote here, would also be applicable to two other places. Get for edit and what are the other one? Get for delete. Get for delete. Same code, whatever you're doing. Okay. That leaves out the create, the get for create and the post for create, edit, and delete. So tell me, what code would you need to change for the get for create? Any code that needs to be changed out here? Any code that needs to be changed out here?
No.
Right? Because you want a blank value to be shown when you go to create. And any code that needs to be changed here, what is the code that we need to do here? We are receiving an employee object. So what is to be done now here? Help me with this code. Help me with this code. What should I do now? I've got the employee object. Now all that I do
Insert
is what?
command. Insert into database.
Yeah. So employee dot insert employee, the object that you have created here, object that you're receiving here. Right? This is what we're doing. Of course, I don't have an insert employee right now, but you could have written one which would take care of that field. And on similar lines, in the post for edit, again, you're receiving what? Employee obj. And what would you now, get out here is, instead of employee dot insert employee, this would now be what? Employee dot update employee with the obj. And similarly, this would be what? Employee dot delete employee.
Delete employee.
With the ID. Are you clear on this, everybody? So I'm going to now jump to the sort of finished code. I would have liked to, ideally, in an ideal scenario, I would have liked to have discussed this with you the other day, then asked you to do this, and then come back in today's session and checked it out, whether you have finished that or not. Ideally, I would have liked to do that. But that day also we were way past the time, and secondly, you all had a sword hanging on your head where you were wanting to prepare for your exam and whatnot. So I didn't ask you to do that the other day. Now I'm not asking you to do that right now. But what I am going to do is I'm going to show you the finished code. Right? Let me comment out this. And I'm not making any changes to this. So even when you are trying it out, please do not make any changes in this project. Create a new project where you're writing all the code for working with the database. So this is the finished code. The same thing that we discussed. Index which takes what? Employee dot get all employees. Okay, now I think it's using different database, not using the same database that you have. So let's run this and see what happens. So this is what is happening. Employee is returning what here? A single employee. Right? You can remove the equal to 1 also. We don't need that. Okay. In the create for this one, what are we doing here in this case? What are we doing here in this case? Calling insert employee. And then the code that they have is right now is return redirect to action name of index. So this is what we are doing out here. And so also in your edit, this code is same to what you did in details. In edit, what are we doing here? Employee dot update employee. Delete same code as details, and here employee dot delete employee. So let me first run this and show you, and then we'll get into the actual code. It's taking too long to run actually. Again, when I start off your Zoom session, it actually slows down the whole list. It's taking really long. I think it's a issue with the database connectivity also. I may not be, able to work with the database correctly. It's causing a problem on there as well. Okay, finally I got these records. Anyway, so these are the values that we have here, and details. So it shows you details /7, right? Wherein you could go back to the list. All right. If I want to delete a record, I could choose that and delete a record. Then that record has been deleted. Or I could edit a record and save a record. So that's the value that you have saved. Create also, I'm not running that, but that is also functional at this point. Okay. And all these methods have been written into my model class. Right. So do you want me to show you the code for the methods, or are you going to try it out on your own? Is my question to you. I have discussed what needs to be done in all the methods. I can understand we are running short of time and I can directly show you the code here, or I can share the code and leave it for you to try on your own. So what should be my code? What should be my approach? Can I expect you all to, without discussing the code that I am doing, can I expect you to try it out and use my code as a reference point in case you're stuck? Can we do that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, I'll show you one of the methods. And then you can probably do the same thing for the others. So this is the one which gave me all the records. Okay. So all that I've done here is, fetched the records into a data reader. And I've got a list of employees initially. Initially, this list is blank. Keep reading all the records. And for every record that you read, add it to the list, list of employees that we have. So this is the details that I've added out here. I've done it all in one line only, but essentially these are the 4 properties that you read: employee number, name, similarly basic and department number. Right? Okay. Now, if an exception occurs in your code, so here there's less chance of an exception occurring, but there are more chances of an exception occurring, let's say the insert or maybe in an update, right? So for example, if you're trying to insert a value and what if some validations in the database are not met? So it would throw up an exception. So you catch the exception and you rethrow the exception. So you could actually, you don't even need EX out here. You can directly say catch exception and then throw that exception, same exception that we have out here. So now who would get the exception? When my code is throwing this exception, who would get this exception? Where would this exception be now passed on to? This I'm getting it from the get all employees. So where would this code now be throwing an exception, or where would be writing the handling code for the exception?
Where the method is called.
Where that method is called. Now I have done it not for the other methods, I've done it for insert. So here again for insert, the same code is what you have done earlier. Again, if an exception is caught anywhere where the exception occurs, I'm throwing that same exception again, and I'm now catching it in the controller. Right, I'm catching it in the controller, and in the controller, all right, this is where this is the post for create. This is where my exception is happening. So I try to do this in a try block. If an exception occurs, it goes into the exception handler. And now I want to pass this exception message to the view. So one way you have seen that in which you could do that is by displaying this in the view bag. So line number 64, for example, is putting that ex.message into viewbag.message, and in the view, right, in the view, employee, sorry, this is in the create. In the view, somewhere in here, what am I giving out here? Is viewbag.message. So if viewbag, if there was no exception, what would happen now in this case? If there was no exception, viewbag.message would be blank. And if it's blank, there's no problem. But if it was not blank, then the message would be actually shown up here. So the message occurred in my model, was passed to the controller. The controller put in a try catch block, received the message, and passed the same message through the view bag into the view. And that's where you're finally displaying it to the end user. Are we clear on this, everybody? Are we clear on what we have done in this example?
Yes.
Questions, if any, with this approach. So if an exception occurred here, catch it, send it via the viewback.message and simply return the view out here. Now, what if there was no exception? What if there was no exception? Currently, what does line 60 do for you? Return redirect to action index. What does this do for you? What will this line do for you?
It is redirecting us to the action name index.
Correct. It's taking you back to index. So after a successful insertion, this code is right now going and showing you the values in index. Now, instead of doing that, what if I want to change this slightly? And on the same page, I'd like to display a message which says that, inserted successfully. So instead of returning a redirect to action index, what do I do here firstly? Firstly, what do I do? Return view. So you now are on the same page. Which page are we on? We are on the create page itself. And in addition to that, in my viewback.message, now I'm putting in this inserted successfully. So now you have two options. Either it works fine and you stay on the same page with the message being shown to the user, or if it didn't work fine, then what happens here in this case? What here
We get an
happens
exception message and we will be on same page.
to the user, right? So I've changed this slightly. I've changed the flow slightly. The point I'm trying to make here is that the scaffolded code is not necessarily your finished product. The scaffolded code is the start. It gives you an idea of what to do. And if you'd like to change what it's doing, then you're free to write your own code out here. Are we clear on this, everybody? Questions, if any, with this code, with any of this code out here? No questions? All right. So I'll just stop sharing because I don't want to show you the next section of what I'm doing. But okay, I can actually show you because I have not written any code for it. But let me take you to the delete page. And this is your delete page, right? This is your delete page out here. Where this was the code that was actually generated for you. Now, when you come back to the controller and if the user, submits that form in all other pages, in all other views that you had, you are getting the employee details, right? You're getting the employee details. So you're getting it in edit, you're getting it in create. Both of these are giving you the employee details. But now I'm going to try the same thing in delete. And let's see whether you get the employee details or not. Okay, that's what I wanted to actually incorporate out here. So my first question to you is, when you try to run this and you click on delete, okay, I'm trying to receive the employee details when I click on delete out here. That's the point I'm trying to make. Okay. Are you having your projects open in the background? Are you all having that project open? Model binding. If you can just open the delete, the view, the in Visual Studio, open the delete view, and I'm going to point out a few things and ask you a couple of questions based on that. So if I said delete this, for example, right? These are the values that I have: 5 times 9, and then Allen, and then basic and department number. Okay, so I have this. So now I get the ID correctly, right? ID is given to me correctly, right? Where is the ID coming in from? Where is the ID coming in from?
The
How does it
URL.
get there? Sorry?
URL.
Correct. And from the URL, where does it go?
Controller.
Controller.
It goes into the root data. And from the root data, it is now being passed to your controller. So remember root data?
Yes, sir.
This one here, this is the root data. So you're from the URL, it is picking it up. What are the prerequisite? We have said this multiple times before. What are the prerequisite? Prerequisite was what? For this to be passed to the controller, how does the thing work? What do you need to do?
Name should be same.
Name should be same, and binding does the rest for you. So we got the ID, right? And in this example, we needed the ID, and it worked perfectly. So my code was working correctly. I showed you how it ran and it gave me the values. But my question is different. My question is, if I try looking at EMP here, right? I don't get any value in there. Employee number, name, basic, and department number. All these 4 values are not getting anything at all. So my question is why? Why did it work with edit or with create, but not work with delete? What are the reason for that? You all can look in, if you all have the things open on your screen, you can look at that and tell me. Otherwise, you can look at my screen. So tell me, why didn't it work? So I'll show you create. This is what create was. Edit, of course, was very, very similar to create. Very, very similar. You can almost say it's the same code only. It's the same code to create. And delete was this code. So why did delete not work? Why didn't delete receive the employee values when edit and create did?
Because we are using post method for that 2 things.
So
Means data of the all model object will be gone with the view request.
So what is the problem? What is wrong in the delete? What is not? How is it different, and why is it not getting the values? You're on the right track, but can you explain it better?
So the
So
properties are not included into a form tag here.
Correct. And what else? Yes, was it Krunal who was answering earlier?
yes, sir.
Krunal, complete your answer.
Like on with the get requesting, we are not sending data like the model or object. We can send it with the post request.
There's a post happening. I clicked on the submit button. It is a post. It's not a get. I clicked on the
Okay.
submit button. I did click. It's a post. If you look at the code that is running here, we are in the post. This is not the get. So why didn't it get the value? So one of the suggestions that has come here, who was the other person who answered?
Akash.
Harsh.
Akash.
Akash, sorry. So what Akash said is that the problem is that these guys, this was not inside the form. So if I moved this inside the form, would it then work? If I move this inside the form, would it then work? Yes, Akash?
Yes, sir. It will work.
It should work.
Yes.
Yeah, others, what is your opinion? This is what Akash pointed out. See, the problem was that that these objects were not inside the form. So put them inside the form and then it will work, is what Akash is saying. I'm saying it will still not work. Why will it not work?
Sir, name parameter is missing. Like we should have to give name attribute to pass the values.
So this is generating it, no? How did you do it there? In edit or whatever, right? You did it like this, and then here we're doing it like this. What is this using? This is using a HTML helper, that is using a tag helper. So what is the problem now? Why is this not working? Why is that working?
Is it like mapping is only done for create and edit?
Okay, so now the answer to all your questions lies in view source. You look at view source and tell me what is the problem in this code. Now I have moved it inside here, right? Like Akash suggested, ki move it inside the form tag. Okay, so let's go to delete and let's look at the view page source. Okay, so now my form begins here. My form begins here. And these are all the values that were generated. Right? These are all the values. Right, Akash? So now it's inside the form tag. Agree?
Yes, sir.
Right? Form is ending here somewhere, right at the end, there's a slash form. So even now the values will not come correctly. Why will they not come correctly?
It is not generating input tags.
Correct, that is the answer. Two things. It's not an input tag anymore. You're just displaying the values. No? You're just saying name and then displaying that name, displaying basic and just displaying that. This is a display for. Are we getting this? So if it is not, Krunal said that it doesn't have a name. But Krunal, you have to go one step back. It is not an input tag to begin with. Having a name is the second part. First prerequisite is what? Needs to be an input tag. And because there's no input tag here, that's why the value is not being sent back. Are we getting this? So what if, for example, can I remove it out of the form tag? I mean, I didn't need to put into the form tag, right?
Yes,
That made no difference whatsoever. Now, can I do something like what I did in edit? And let's say, for example, take an input tag here and copy it to this one, right? Okay, can I do this? Will this now work? Will this work or will it not work? Will I
Yes,
get
it
the
will.
value of employee number when I submit the form?
Yes, we will get a value.
I should get the value. Correct or no?
Yes, sir.
So when I run this now, I should get whatever the value that I have out here. So let's see whether I get the values. Is there a breakpoint on my code? Otherwise, I have to run it all over again. Yeah, there is a breakpoint. So if I click on delete and I click on delete, now what has happened here? What has happened here?
Input
You
tag
got
is
that
generated.
input tag. So now if I click on delete, would I get the employee number? ID of course was working. This is no problem here. But would I get the employee number here with the EMP dot? Yes, no. Let's confirm. So EMP and you will find that the employee number is coming up. But what is the problem with this sort of a thing? Are you okay with what is being shown here? Are you okay with what is being shown here?
No, we can make it hidden.
Correct. So we don't want to create an input tag which is going to be accessible directly where the user can change the value. And then that was my next question. So what should I do out here? Input type equal to, yes,
Hidden.
type equal to hidden. Now what does the ASP for do for you? This is your tag helper. It will generate a control having the same name and the same ID as what you're binding it to. So what are we binding it to? Employee number. And what will it generate? What will the HTML generate? It will say input type equal to hidden, ID equal to employee number, and name equal to employee number. So now the name would be generated for you. All right. And let's confirm this. So the difference between what we did earlier and what we're doing now, of course, is that you don't want that, input type to be a text box. You don't want it to be shown out there. Instead, you'd like to have it what? To be a hidden variable. So now if you look at the view source, right, look at what the view source tells you, and that will tell you a lot of information. So here what is happening now? Input type equal to hidden, and most importantly, the ID and name is being picked up automatically. Are we clear on this, everybody? So how did the ID and name be picked up out here? How did we get this value here? Through what?
Model
How did it
binding.
automatically? Yes,
Through model binding.
model binding. Very good answer. Excellent answer. So model binding is a two-way street. Model binding works both ways. Firstly, you're passing it here. What are we passing it here? We're passing it an employee object. So the value from the employee object is being copied into the control. So the name of the property and the name of the control will be the same. And value from the object, the property of that object will be copied into the control. That's the first thing. The second thing, what will model binding offer you? When you submit the value, whatever the value in the control will automatically be copied into your object. Are we clear on this, everybody? So this is how you would actually get the values. Now, again, I don't know why I keep closing in, but I should have shown you this. What values will come up right now? What values will come up right now when you do this? The only value that will come up is what? What are you only going to get?
Employee number.
Employee number. But can you also similarly get the other properties?
Yes.
Can you also get similarly the other properties? What do you need to do out here? All that will do is what?
Add input tag.
Yeah, add input type to hidden, add 4 tags for employee number, name, basic, department number, whatever properties that you want to be accessible out there, right? Add a input tag for that, right? This submit button right now is not being submitted to the form. Submit button not being submitted to the form. So why is it not being submitted? It doesn't have an input. I mean, the tag is not there. The name equal to so and so not there. Okay. So ensure that whatever you want to be submitted should have a name tag out. And then this should be able to take up the values out. Are we clear on this, everybody?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions, any doubts with this entire project, with this whole flow of this entire project? Because I'm going to sort of move into a different area at this point. Yeah. So I would be, uploading this code. You can quickly look at how this code works, and we will be sort of, I'd expect you to complete this code for me, right? I'm going to show you another property here, another thing here called as data annotations. Right. So what do data annotations do for you? Essentially, data annotations are mostly used for validation of your forms. Okay. They use what is known as unobtrusive validation. Unobtrusive validation is when it uses the jQuery syntax with some inbuilt validators in jQuery, which do that for you without inserting any JavaScript validation code for you. So this by default is using an unobtrusive validation. Now, where is this coming into play? So let me show you what we're doing out here. I'll take you to the models, and I have, this is not really necessarily just what I want to save, but it's more of what I want to show. So in addition to giving in the properties, right? In addition to giving the properties, there are certain attributes on the properties. And these attributes that you're using are all available in this namespace, system.componentModel.data annotations. So firstly, what is an annotation? When you talk about an annotation, what do you understand by annotation? When you say it's an annotation in English, what is the annotation? Another word for annotation. Yes.
To highlight something.
Sorry.
To highlight something.
Yeah, to highlight something. Very good. So you basically add a note. To annotate something is to basically add a note. Annotate, the word annotate is you scribble something like a post-it note on it or whatever, and then you give extra information. So all of these things, all of these data annotations are changing the way in which your property is being accepted. Okay. And certain common validations can be performed with the help of these data annotations. So all of these data annotations are attributes that inherit from the validation attribute. So there's a annotation called validation, and that is the base class for all these annotations, the validation attribute, which inherits from the, I'll give you an example. See, if you look at the required thing, this is actually a class called required attribute. Where else have you seen an attribute before this? We have seen one in one of the examples. Where you can give extra information about a class or a method of the class or about an assembly. We had taken that example. Do you remember serialization?
Yes, sir.
In serialization, your class is an attribute of serializable. So here, I've given my name property an attribute of required attribute. So when you give an attribute, the class name actually has the word attribute at the end of it. And if you look at required attribute, this inherits from validation attribute, which in turn inherits from the attribute class. So the attribute class is the base class of all your attributes. Okay. And the validation attribute is where most of the data annotations inherit from. So let's start with this. What do you think this attribute would do? A required attribute. What will this do for you?
It makes mandatory field to enter.
Correct. So when you have this in a form/form and you try to submit the form, it forces you to enter a value in there before you can go ahead. Okay. Or if you look at string length, what do you think the string length would do for you? What will string length do for you?
Setting up a maximum length to enter.
Maximum length, you can't enter more than that. Number of characters can't be more than that. Okay. And if you do manage to enter more than that, what are the error messages showing you?
Value.
The dash value. Now the dash value will be replaced with the name of the property. So the name value cannot exceed dash characters. The second dash will be replaced with the length of the string. Okay. So this is what we are giving here as the error message. If you don't give the error message is optional. If you don't give the error message, it will generate some default error message for you. Now, if the error message is generated, like in this case, what example, let's say you try to enter a name and you leave it blank. Now look and tell me, where do you think the error message will be shown to you?
Span tag.
Sorry?
In the span tag.
In the span, correct. So wherein you say ASP validation for. So this would be the validation messages that come up, would be shown up here in this span tag. So by default, they have shown it where immediately after that control that you're accepting. Immediately after. Okay. There is also something here called as a validation summary, which currently is not being shown, but I'll show you how to display that. So what do you think the validation summary, what will that do for you? Summary, what do you think that will do for you?
That it is submitted successfully or not?
No. A validation summary is basically all the validations that have happened on that page. All the errors that have happened on that page, validation errors, will be shown at one place. Instead of here, what is happening? Each individual validation message is shown separately. But if you want them to be summarized and shown together, you can do that. Sometimes, I don't know whether you've noticed at the end of the page, if there are validations, instead of showing it to you next to the text box, it shows you at the bottom of the page. Have you seen that in certain websites?
Yes, sir.
So mostly in
So that is
government
what they're
websites.
using a validation summary out there. Okay, so your messages now can be coming in here as, where's it gone? Employees. Employees, sorry. Would be coming in either individually or all together you can display it. So let's look at some of these. Data type. And if I did data type, this is actually an enum data type dot. So what can you identify here? What sort of data type is this? Does it look familiar? Does it look familiar? Yes, no. Have you seen this before? And if yes, where?
So mostly we have seen for email and phone numbers. Means
But where are these?
in the input text.
Correct. That is the answer I'm looking for. So all of these are input type equal to so and so. So what are the different types that you have? Input types. This is all those options. What input type should it generate? Are we clear on this, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Look at this one. Display name equal to employee number instead of EMPNO. And let me run this and show you. Right. So it's running create. And see what I've used. I've said display the whole word employee space number. Okay. See whether you can make out what is happening here. Yeah. Is it evident what is happening here? What am I displaying there? Instead of the word EMPNO, I'm displaying what? Employee number. What is this actually? This is your display name for. Which you use on one of the earlier days. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
So this has been picked up from where? From a data annotation, where you are saying that instead of showing the word employee number, display what? Display this longer message out there. Okay. All right. What about the next one? Let's say range. What do you think this would do?
This will set a range for minimum and maximum value.
Minimum and maximum values that you want to do. Now, if you're accepting strings, you might want to do what? A min length and a max length. Right? That's for your strings. Display again this display is the same thing as what we did here. Data type again is the same one that we used here. Okay. Scaffold column false. So just remember this dummy column and let's see what it does. Email ID is self-explanatory. Required we have seen before. Data type we have seen before. Data type password would do what for you? What will that do for you?
It,
Password,
it will make the string unreadable.
correct. And look at this one. Compare it. Confirm password. Compare. So what will it check for now? Compare password. Confirm password should be the same as what?
Password.
As password. Now what is telling me that it should be the same is the first property out here. Which property do you want it to be same as? So this is saying confirm password should be compared to the password, and if they don't match, that should be the error message that should be shown. So let's quickly try out scaffold column for dummy, scaffold column, see how it works, and then the compare option that we had. So tell me what scaffold column false does. Scaffold column false, what is it doing for you? Scaffolding is what? What do you understand by the word scaffolding?
Some code that is generated by the system itself.
Correct. And scaffold column false would do what for you?
No
We will
previous.
not use the code which is generated by system.
No, it says that this column will not be generated in the scaffolding. This column will not be generated in the scaffolding. So if you generate the scaffolding, you will find that that dummy column is not being generated at all. Are we clear on this?
So the purpose of
Say that
scaffolding
again.
column. The purpose of the scaffolding column, why is it added over there? Then if it is not serving any purpose.
I might want to use a property in my class, which could be a hidden property or whatever. But hidden property meaning I don't want to accept it from the user. So don't generate the scaffolding for that.
Okay.
Okay. I'll show you another way of not generating scaffolding. What can you do for not generating scaffolding? Generate it, select it and delete. Right? That also would work, right?
Yes, sir.
You could do that as well. But yeah, I mean, scaffold column is to begin with not generating it. All right. Regular expressions here. Checking for what? In this case, checking for whether up to accept up to 40 characters, minimum 1, maximum 40, and accept uppercase, lowercase. So again, I'm not covering regular expressions with you, but regular expression is a JavaScript class, regexp. And you could specify pattern matching with that. Okay. I am not going to get into what are regular expressions here, but it's useful to know a few basic regular expression rules so that you can actually do some pattern matching out here. Are we clear on this, everybody? So these are some of the things that you could do. Now, I've just shown you a few of the classes there. There are multiple such classes in the data annotations namespace. Multiple such. So you can actually, go through this. Some of them, not all of them, some of them, for example, let's say required attribute. If you go in there, they'll show you a small code snippet on how to use it and what are the values in there. So do try out all of these. Okay, do read up on this. And wherever you're creating a form, it would be useful to have this sort of data annotations which do your validations to you. Okay. Later in the day today, after I finish covering certain topics, I will be discussing the projects, right? Aniket messaged me today again and reminded me, ki, Arey, you haven't given the projects. I have not taught anything, only how can I give you the projects? What can you do the projects on? So once you know a few things, then it makes sense discussing that mini project of ours. All right. Data annotations, okay? Are we clear on this? Questions?
sir. So how is it means comparing itself that this must go for means internally how this .NET is working and giving this rejects for email only or something like that? How is it doing it?
It is using those jQuery validators. I told you it uses unobtrusive validation.
Okay.
So if you look at look at the view source. If you look at the view source, it will show you the actual values out here. Okay. Oh, that reminds me, I didn't do this with you at all. I didn't talk about the validation summary. So hold on, we're not done with this. So this validation summary, by default, it shows you model only. Now there are different values that you have here. All, model only, and none. So none means what? None means what?
No validation summary.
Don't show anything in the validation summary. And all would mean what? All would mean what? Show all the messages out there. Okay. So let me run this once with the validation summary. Right. And the earlier option that you had was model only. And if I create this and these are the validations that are not being satisfied, then this is the summary for you. Of course, you can put the summary wherever you want to. You can put, if you want at the bottom, you can put at the bottom, wherever you want to. So this is what this validation summary would do for you. Okay. Earlier option was what? Model only.
Model only.
So when it was model only, then it was not showing it to you. Right. So this model only is not showing you these values. So what do you mean by model only? Let me take you back to this code. When you take back to this code, how does employee obj get the values? How does employee obj get the values?
From the UI.
Have I discussed this model state.isval? Is this your code or is this some other code? This is not your code, no?
No, sir.
It's not code that I've written with y'all, or is it code that I've written with y'all?
No, so this is not that code.
I have not shown you this code. Okay. So my question to you is, how does this get the values? Employee obj, how does it get the values? Yes, through what? Through?
Query string.
No. Model is employee. In the create, how does it get the value?
Model binding.
Model binding. So effectively what it's doing is writing code like this: employee obj and obj dot employee number is equal to read value from HTML control. Agree or no? This is what it's doing. Similarly, what? Obj.employee name is equal to read value from HTML control. Which HTML control is it reading from? This one was a control called employee number. This one was a control called name, and so on and so forth. And this sort of code is being repeated for everybody. So when you do this code, what is it actually calling? What is this code actually calling? Yes. Come on, look at that code, look at the left-hand side and tell me what it's calling. What is this calling? You've done this 1,000 times before.
Properties of employee.
So when you call the property of employee, what is it calling? My question is still
Set.
calling the set code for that. Acha, in the set code, you're not written any code right now for this one here, but have you written some code at some point for set, which
Yes,
says
sir.
that check for validation first, and if not valid, throw an exception?
Yes.
Agree? You'll have done that, right?
Yes, sir.
So when you're doing model binding, what if the value that is there in the, let's say, for example, we have said that employee number should be greater than 0. And what if the value in the text box that you are reading it from, let's say the value is 0. What will happen now? What would happen now in this case? Yes. Would it throw an exception or no? In your set, if you kept a code for should be greater than 0. So will it throw an exception?
It
Not
will
throw an
throw
exception.
an exception.
It'll throw an exception. So this basically is an exception that is being thrown when model binding is happening. Are we writing code for this? Are we writing code for this or no?
No,
Are
sir,
we
we are
writing
not.
code for doing this or no? This is being called internally. Now, after model binding is done, if the code that you have written in your model, if any of that code has thrown an exception, then model state dot is valid would return a false. I'll repeat. While doing model binding, if any of your code that you have written in your properties, if any of that code has thrown an exception, anyone, suppose there are 10 properties, even one of them threw an exception, then model state dot is valid returns a false. And if all the code has worked correctly, then model state dot is valid returns true. Understood?
Yes, sir.
So now I should only call the insert if what?
If
I
this
should only
valid
call
is
the
true.
insert if what? If model state dot is valid is true.
True.
Acha, what if it is not true? Now I want to show the message. What went wrong? Now how do I show the message? This helps you show the message. If you said model only, it would mean what? If you said model only, what will it do? What will this summary show you? Model only. Yes. Exception messages that have been thrown by the model. If you said all, then it will also show you exception messages that have been shown by this one, by all these validation controls. All right. And if you said none, then it won't show you any exception messages. So these are the three options that you have here. All would show you model exceptions plus exceptions thrown by your data annotations. Model only is self-explanatory. Only exceptions thrown by the model. And that's how you can show the user what the exceptions were. To try this code, what will you need to do? How do you try this code? I'm not going to show you this code. What will you need to do out here? You'll have to create validations on your properties. And whatever, if the code is not okay, then throw an exception. And whatever exceptions are being thrown, those will be shown up as model errors. Are we clear on this? Questions, if any? All right. So something for you to try out. Okay. I'm going to take a while longer, but I'm not getting any enthu response. Abhishek also normally is a little more enthusiastic. Now he's like tired, end of the day, end of the module, exam also over. Now why do we have to study? Right? So a little more enthu, please, everybody. And we can make a quick break and then you all can come back and we can work a little bit more. The next topic. No, I understand that. I know that. Yes, Suraj, we are having a lecture in the morning. So I'm saying you're exhausted end of the day. I don't deny you that. I would have jumped on you all if this was the response that I had first in the morning. I would have jumped on you. But I know that you had a long day. So you all now know what I feel like. My day starts at 8 in the morning, ends at 9 in the night. Okay. Anyway. So today is a very relaxed day for me. Today I have got only 8 hours of lectures. Right. So I don't have a long day today. So I feel like today is a holiday. So I'm in a chirpy mood. But anyway, so we will take a quick break. It's about 10 to 6. We take a 10-minute break, freshen up, come back, have a nice hot cup of tea or coffee, or anything else that you need to take to wake up. Because the next section that we're doing is one of the most important sections, that is state management in the ASP.NET MVC. Right? So 10-minute break, we'll start off at 6. All right, so I'm back. Can you all hear me and see me with whatever we're doing?
Yes, sir.
So the next topic that we're going to look at is a fairly, important topic here in ASP.NET MVC, which is how to do state management out here. Okay. So let's try and understand what is state management all about and why you need it. Typically, when you work with any web-based application, there are two key features that are at play out here. So the web is a stateless, connectionless mechanism. What do you imply by stateless and what do you imply by connectionless? One by one, could I have your explanation of what you understand by stateless firstly and what do you understand by connectionless? Yes. What do we understand by stateless mechanism? Web is a stateless mechanism. Yes.
Like the HTTP is a stateless, like every
Correct.
time.
So yeah, so even the web, most of the web is working on HTTP itself. So go ahead. What you?
Static.
Yeah,
So
so
what
when
is?
we
Yeah,
do
go ahead.
when we
Prudhan,
send
complete answer. Prudhan, complete answer. 1 second.
when we send a request from the client side, then it is always establish a new collection between a client side and server side. So we call it stateless.
So once
Not
response is
exactly.
given,
The server
That is
doesn't
more
know.
to do with connectionless.
The server doesn't know every time who is the
it forgets the
web
response.
or who is sending the request every time.
Correct. So more than the server doesn't know who's sending the request every time, more than just that, the values that you have in the previous request are not retained when the request is over. That is what you mean by stateless. Any values that you have received in the request are over as soon as the request is over. Like for example, what if the browser send a request? Let's start with sending a request for a particular page. All right. Let's say it started with, let's say, a request. Let's call this R1 for, let's say, index page. So what does the server do here in this case? Server receives the request and it's passing the request to the method of the controller. So here you would have get for the index. And what code would you typically have in the get for the index? What code is it typically writing here? Is writing a return view, right? With any data that you are passing in there. Now this value, when you give a return view, automatically what is it doing here at this point? This return view is sending back a response to the browser, right? And any values that you had received in the request, any values that might have come in the request R1 are now not stored, right? So request R1 might contain some data, like for example, what if it has some URL, or what if it had any other parameters? These values are lost the moment you say return view and you're returning the response back from the server. Are we clear on this, everybody? Now, when you issue a fresh request, let's say now on the index page, there's a link for the create page, right? So at this point, what will it be? Request, let's say R2 for, this is the create page. And this here, of course, is the get for the create page. So what is it doing again now? At this point, sending you to the get for the create. Okay, in which again we had code which said what? Return view. Now the point I'm making here about it being stateless is that the data that it received in R1 is not retained when your response is sent back. And when R2 comes to you, request R2 comes to you, it's a fresh request with the server not keeping track of the previous data. That's what we mean by stateless, not retaining state, not retaining any data, right? What would happen here in this case with the return view again? At this point, what is it doing? What is this doing here in this case? Again, sending back a
Response.
When it sends back a response, this R2 that was created also has been lost, right? What do you mean by connectionless? That was stateless, not retaining any of the previous requests.
So with every new request, the connection will be established and dropped?
Correct. And it's like a fire and forget mechanism. Every new request like a fire and forget. Send a request, get back the response. But the server and the browser are not kept connected at any point of time. It receives the request, processes the request, sends back the response. But there is no, connection out here where the server can know what is happening in the browser. So first question is why is it implemented in a stateless, connectionless manner? Why is the web maintained that way? What is the reason for doing that?
In backend, we can say to avoid trafficking if it maintains a single request.
Okay, what would happen if it was stateful or connected? What would happen then if it was stateful or connected?
So load on the server might increase because of it is carrying redundant data.
Correct. So the server will crash under the load. Imagine a busy server like Facebook, which is receiving hundreds and thousands of requests every minute, for example. So what would happen there in that case? If the server has to firstly keep track of all the connections, or if it was retaining the data of your previous requests, the server would be, it will be tremendous stress on the server. It would not be able to retain the values. So for scalability, the web is connectionless and stateless. Scalability meaning what? What do I mean by it's scalable? What does scalability imply?
Large number
of users, increasing the number of users. So without having to do much configuration or whatever else, it should be able to support a larger number of users. Okay. Now, because it is stateless and connectionless, if you wanted to retain the value of any previous request, if you wanted to store what values that are there in the earlier thing, you have to write code to retain the requests, to retain the values. And this code that you write is called as state management in ASP.NET MVC. So state management simply deals with what, saying that values are not being retained, here, the moment the request is over, the values are being lost. So how can I now store it somewhere where the value is available for a longer period of time? And then you decide what values you want to store. So that way, if you're deciding what is relevant to you, see, you would want to know about the previous request, but not the entire request, maybe a small part of the request. So that will keep it manageable. And that's what we're going to look at next in the state management option out here. Okay. Now, some things that we are going to talk about, you've already done. So if you're talking about state management in ASP.NET MVC, one object that you already know about is the view bag. View bag also allows you to store state. Now, from where to where? This is only for the current request. Only for the current request. The moment the current request is over, what will happen? What will happen now? Whatever data that you have in view bag is lost, is destroyed. Okay. Values can be sent from where to where. You all tell me now this, From where to where can you send the values?
Model to view.
No. Model doesn't come into the picture. Model doesn't know about the view. Who's calling the model?
Controller.
From the controller. Where is the method? You're writing code in the controller method. No, you're not writing code in the model to pass the value. So from controller to the view is what you're using the values from. Okay. How do you use it? Usage, So this is actually a dynamic object, right? And the usage is as this viewBag dot property equal to value. For example, I could do this viewBag dot ID equal to ID. You had written code like this, right? To pass that ID from the controller to the view. And how did we retrieve the value later? Somewhere later in your code, to retrieve the value, you did what? Let's say maybe int x is equal to viewBag dot ID. I could do this. Right? So that's how you could work with this one. So this is something that you're familiar with. Are we clear on this, everybody?
Yes.
All right. Now, another object that you have like the view bag is something called as view data. View data is very similar to the view bag. So it is only available for the current request. It is again from controller to view, but it is not a dynamic object. It is actually a dictionary, right? And the way in which you'd use this is view data of property equal to value. So instead of calling it property, I'll call it key. Of key equal to value, right? Where when you store it as a key value pair, the key that you give in here, what is the key? What is the data type of the key? Data type of the key is what?
Int.
No, data type of the key. Look at this.
String.
Is a string. And the data type of the value is of type object. So you can store anything that you want in there. Right? Syntax for this would be what? View data of ID equal to ID. And if I had to retrieve this, now instead of view back.id, this will be what? View data of ID. But because this is an object, because the right hand side is returning an object, see, this is returning the value for this ID. And the left hand side is an integer. You need to do what?
Unbox int.
Typecast it to an int. And you're right, correct. Here boxing is happening and here unboxing is happening. Right? So also here also, it is actually using this out here, the syntax is using this. Now, if you notice, other than the fact that the syntax is different, they're doing exactly the same thing. So why do they have two objects? Why do they have two objects doing exactly the same thing? The answer is these are not two objects. This is the same object. This is the same object. So the view bag is a wrapper for view data. Is a wrapper for view data. What do we mean by wrapper for view data? When you do this viewback.id equal to ID, internally, it goes and stores it into view data. It goes and stores it into view data, right? And when you're trying to retrieve this value, again, internally, what is it doing? It's actually reading the value from view data. Okay.
Yes, sir. So, what will be the cases if it is anyhow?
Listen, let me complete and I'll take your question.
Yeah.
So now again, the question is why have two different things? Why have this wrapper for this? Why not have viewback directly? The answer is because initial versions of MVC did not have viewback. They only had view data. And later, in later versions of MVC, when see this is using dynamic coding. So when this dynamic coding feature was introduced in .NET version 4 onwards, that's when they introduced viewback. But the older code only supported view data. Are we clear on this, everybody?
Yes.
Earlier versions, there was only view data. Then when dynamic coding was introduced, to make things easier for you, they brought in the view bag, which internally goes and stores into view data. So if you look at this syntax, look at these two lines of syntax, which is easier to use? Is view bag easier to use or is view data easier to use?
View back, sir.
Because there is no typecasting involved out here. Everything is being, you're accessing it directly out here. Are we clear on this, everybody? Does that explain? Was it Krunal who was asking that?
Abhishek, sir.
Abhishek. Does it explain why we have? Okay. Now you can do something interesting. You can store it into view bag and try accessing from view data. You think it will work? Store into view bag and try accessing from view data. Will it work or no? Yes, no,
sir.
come on.
It must work.
100% it will work.
Yes.
Because it is internally storing that. Or do it the other way around. Store it into view data and try accessing it from view bag. View bag is what? Is just a wrapper for view data. So even that would work. Have you all seen view data anywhere? In the code that is generated, have you all seen that anywhere here? Have you all seen that view data anywhere here in your code? Yes, no? Yes or no? I'm asking, have you all seen that anywhere? Have you by chance happened to notice it somewhere?
The view data is for title.
So what is this doing? View data of title is actually being used in your layout out here. So what are they saying? Title will read the value from view data of title, because every page might want to have a different title. And instead of setting the title as a hard-coded value in layout, they're saying that the layout will read the value from the view data. Will you read the value from view data? Are you clear on this?
Yes, yes, sir.
So this is what it is. Could they have used view bag here? Of course they could have. But they just, whenever they generate code, they try to introduce a new concept for you here. So you'll find some of their code is using view bag, some of them is using view data.
So we have given the key title over there and we are passing the value create to it.
Correct. So now each page, each view will have a different title, na? But the layout is the same. So depending upon the page that you're viewing, your title will keep changing.
Yes, sir.
Are we clear on this, everybody? Are we clear on view data, view bag?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now there is a third object out here called temp data. So temp data is again similar to view data. Instead of view data, we'll use what? Temp data. So syntax, everything else is similar to view data with one difference only. And what is the difference out here? Let's see the difference. Okay. For both view bag and view data, values are lost on a redirect. For both view bag and view data, what is happening? The view bag, view data is exactly the same. Values are lost on the redirect, whereas for temp data, values are not lost on the redirect. So where are you writing a redirect? Which line is writing a redirect here? Have you seen a redirect somewhere?
Return redirect to action. Yes.
What does this redirect to action do? It's telling you to go to the index page. And in the index page, you will say return view. So when you say redirect to action, the response is not sent back. It's taking you to the index page, which is sending back the response. Are we clear on this? So this is what your redirect to action is doing for you. Now, if you have done a redirect to action, so let's say on this page, on here, on this line, on line 51, if I have stored something into view data or view bag, this is not going to be available to me on the index page. But if I have stored something into temp data, then that temp data will be available to me on the index page. So view bag and view data are only on the current view. And even if you do a redirect, you lose the values. As opposed to that temp data is for the current request. But when you do a redirect, then temp data value is available on the other page. Questions, if any? Yes. So when you send in another request, now here what happens, typically I'm taking the page where you go to index. From index you're going to create. From create you're going to where? From create you're seeing the page. What is it going here? What are the next requests that's coming generally? Yes.
Index.
No. Create is 2, no? This was what? This is the get for create. After that, request R3 is what? Where you fill the values and you do a post for create. That's the sequence that you're going through, right? I'm just taking the same sequence. You'll first go to index, click on create, you see the blank page, then you fill the values. Now you're doing a submit. At this point, the values are going to create post. So now this is your post for create. And post for create contains what? Employee OBJ. Remember, what is this an example of? What is this? How is it getting the values now? Through model binding. Right? And you try to successfully insert a value, and then you, like in our code that we did today, you could either be doing a return view, or you'll be doing a return redirect to action. I don't have enough space to write down the whole word. Can I write redirect to A? Right? Can I write that?
Yes.
Okay, it's still not fitting. So this is what we are doing out here. Now, what if I had some data here? What if I had some data out here? Right? I had some data out here. Okay. And this data now, my question to you is in index. Okay, in index, would this data be available or not available is my question. So data from here, will it be available here or not? That is my question. If you're done a return view, then it's not going to be available in any case. But if you're done a return redirect to action, then the data will be available here only if what?
TAM data is used.
If this is TEM data. So if TEM data is used, then this will be available. But if it was view bag or view data, both of them, then they will not be available on index. Are you clear on this? What we mean by available in a redirect, but for a TEM data, but not for view bag or view data. Questions, if any?
So, sir, whenever we are passing any object or values, we'll have to use TAM data only, right?
If you're doing a redirect.
Yeah, while a redirect. Okay.
Okay. All right. So now for the remaining of this session, Abhishek, I'm going to message you my personal number and I'll make a video call on WhatsApp and we will talk about what else is happening out here. Okay. Because anyway, there's no reaction also from anybody if I said that. So me and Abhi will call me. We'll chat and we'll talk about all of this. Okay. So that's it for the day. Thank you. Abhishek will continue the session. One-on-one.
Include Krunal also.
Krunal also. Krunal, in between, he suddenly wakes up. Okay, chalo, since Abhishek has recommended, include Krunal also. Krunal, are you here somewhere?
Yes, sir, I'm here only.
So I understand all of you all have had a really long day. Okay. And I totally sympathize with you all. You have my sympathies. You have my, utmost, deepest understanding. Right. And I would probably, in your situation, I will also probably do the same thing with this enthusiasm that you all have. Okay. But I'm also saying that this is one of the most important topics that we're dealing with. Right. So can we have a little bit more? I know I'm asking a lot out of you all, but I need about half an hour from you all of your attention. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Everybody. Can we all switch on the cameras? That will automatically put you at attention. That will automatically, you will automatically become a little conscious, because right now the cameras are off. I am 100% sure half of you all are sleeping. Half of you are not there, the other half are sleeping. Good to see you, Shivani. Shivani, sometimes you also ask questions.
Yes, sir.
So everybody, wake up, perk up. I demand that. Okay, everybody. Krunal, I still can't see you.
Yes,
there
sir.
there you go. Such a handsome face, and you're hiding it from me. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So we are talking about state management, and we're talking about how we can pass values from one place to the other. So far, what have we said? We have said what? That three things are available to us. One is what?
View bag.
First one was view bag. Second was view data, which are identical. These both are similar, are same. View bag is a wrapper for view data. Third object that we saw was temp data, which is available to you in a redirect. But the moment you do a, let's say in the index, you have done the return view will send you back a request. That temp data is also gone. Essentially, as long as you're in the same request, then you can get the values. But the moment the request is over, the values are not available. Right? So far, whatever we have seen. So now, quite often you would want to have values where maybe you're storing something in request 1. Let's say you're storing something in request 1. Let's say maybe something here. And now this value that you have, you want it to be available later in any other request, either here, wherever. So how do you get that available? So to make it available there, you need to create a session variable. You need to create a session variable. And the session variable is available throughout the session. Even if your request is over, see, I've created in this request here. But now I can access it in any other request, as long as I am in the same session. As long as I'm in the same session. So that's your session variable. So how long is the session variable available? Okay. Available for what? For the entire session. Right? Variable created at one place is available at throughout the session in any of the requests. So my question to you, of course, is what is the session? I have told you what is a session variable. Session variable is a variable that's available throughout the session. So question to you is, what is a session?
Session is a time period.
Sir,
Yes.
one request and response session is called a session.
Wrong answer.
Time period taken by the one particular operation.
What do you mean by operation? Define operation. That's very
We can
vague.
say login and log out till time.
No.
Tracking
No.
a user.
Sorry.
Tracking a user.
Okay. So what basically? What is the session?
Time period for which the server is tracking the user.
Okay. Anyone else wants to put into words what is the session?
Like till session variable is
No,
like
session variable is accessible in the session. That is okay. That is some variable that is available in the session. My question is, what is the session?
So session is a time period for which a user is active on a site or on a server.
Correct. All right. So essentially a session is an interaction between the browser and the server. The interaction between the browser and the server, where you're sending a request, getting back a response, sending a request, back a response is called as one session. Okay. Now, how does the server keep track of the session? Or let me start off by asking you, when does the session start? When does the session start?
So whenever we pass a URL,
Be more specific. Be more specific. When does the session
whenever a
start?
request is sent to the server, we can say that.
No, not whenever. Be more specific. That's why I'm telling you.
First request.
First
sent to the
time.
First request. That is what is important. The word first is required in there. Right? Abhishek, I'm sure you'll remember your first time. That first time is special. The first word is special. For whatever you do first.
Yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, let's not go further there. So when does the session start? Session starts on the first request from browser. Okay, that's when the session is said to be started. When does the session end? When does the session end? When does it end? Yes.
After closing a browser window.
Wrong answer. If you answer this question in an interview, I will end the interview here. You don't know anything about web-based programming then. I'm not blaming you. I'm just telling you. That is my impression. Because what did we start off our discussion with? What did we hold on 1 second? Very important to understand this. What did we start off our discussion with? We said that the web is a stateless and connectionless protocol. Connectionless meaning what? If the browser is closed, will the server come to know about it?
When the response is
Hold on, let me complete this point. Very important. You all have finished all your web-based modules. You all are still not clear about what is meaning out here. Connectionless means the browser and the server have no connection whatsoever. So if you answer a question saying that the session will be over when the user closes the browser, I will end the interview there. Don't feel bad about answering this, but I'm telling you, I'm trying to correct you on what you're thinking, Pragati. Can the server know when the browser is closed? Never. Why? Why? Two important points, stateless and connectionless, will not know when this is over. Okay, go ahead. Shivani, were you answering? Who was answering? When does the session end?
Sir, when the response is given back by server, at that time the session.
No.
We have to
Absolutely.
end it.
Even worse. Even worse.
We
Even
have to
worse.
end it.
I will personally escort you to the door. I will ask the earlier person to walk out, but I will personally escort you out of the door.
So after a particular time of inactivity.
Yes, that is the correct answer. Who is that? Who gave that answer?
Sami.
Okay. So when does the session end? After the timeout is over. So what is the timeout track of? Whether in that given time, whether the server has received a request from the browser or not. And for a given time, if there is no request that's coming in, that's when the session ends. Now the default timeout is 20 minutes, but that can be configured. You can configure that. Instead of 20 minutes, you can change that. That 20 minutes is not a fixed value, but that's the default timeout. So that's when the session ends. Are we clear on this, everybody? how does the server keep track of the session? Yes. How does the server keep track of a session? How does it know what was the last time that it got it and what not? How does it keep track of it?
By a session variable.
By a session variable. No, change your answer slightly.
Session key.
Session
Key.
key, right. So the server keeps track of the session by generating a unique session ID. Okay, what does it keep track of the session? Every new session that comes in, not every new request, every new session that comes in, it generates a unique session ID, right? We're calling it session key, session ID, whatever. Okay. Now, what does it do with the session ID? The session ID that it has is sent to the browser. So I'll give you an example. Let's say Tarun sent me a request at 6:39. All right. Tarun, keep track of the time. 6:39, he sent me a request.
Yes, sir.
When he sent me the first request, this is the first request. There is no ID generated for him. His request comes in with a blank session ID. So what does the server do? Server will do what now? Look that there is nothing in the session ID. It will generate a unique session ID. And this session ID now is going to be sent back to Tarun. Okay. Now when Tarun receives this on his browser, it will be available to him for every further request that he sends. It's actually going to store that temporarily on his browser.
Sir, in cookie file.
Yes. 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 I'll come to that. So it's temporarily going to store it out here. Now, every fresh request that Tarun sends, let's say at 6:42, he sent a request again. Now, this earlier ID that he had received from the server is now sent with the response, with the request. Now, initially, what was his expiry time? 6:39, he had sent the request. What was his expiry time initially? Assuming 20-minute timeout.
6:59.
6:59 was his timeout. Now he sent a request at 6:42. So the server uses what is known as a sliding expiration. The sliding expiration means that your now expiry time has gone ahead.
Okay,
which
7
is 20 minutes from the last received request. And now his expiry time will be 6:02. Sorry,
701.
7:02. Sorry. Are we clear on this, everybody? So 7:02 is now his last expiry time. Clear on this? So now what has the server done? Again, made the changes and updated the session ID and sent back to the user, all right? With, when sending it back with the response again. And with every request now that Tarun is sending me, as long as he's in that timeout, his request limit goes further. Now, let's say between 6:42 and 7:02, he does not send me a request. And he sends me a request with, at 7:05, let's say. So now he's sending me the old session ID 7:05. But at the server, what has happened now? That session ID has expired.
Yes, sir.
So now that session ID that has come, the session that has come to me is now considered an expired session. Now the server generates a new session ID and sends that ID back to Tarun. Right? Now, what about the old session ID? All the data that you had in the old session ID has gone away. So this is how your session IDs are maintained. Now, there's a question that came up. We said that with every response, the server is sending the ID to the browser. And with every request, the browser is sending the ID to this. So how is the session ID sent or received or sent to or received from the browser. And the answer to that is in a session cookie. Okay, so you use the word cookie. So that was partly correct. Because it is not just a cookie, it is a very special cookie that does this for you, which is called a session cookie. So session cookie is totally different from all other cookies. The browser could disable other cookies, but the session cookie has a special meaning. And this is used to keep track of the sessions. So with every request, now I receive the session cookie, and every response I'm sending it back out. Are we clear on this, everybody? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. All right. In this, I said, Tarun was the one user that I had. Let's say Abhishek sent me a request at 6:44. So what happens now? Abhishek would get it's a blank request. It's a fresh session ID that will be generated and sent to him. Right? And this would continue. So each one would have its own. What is the sliding expiration of a session? What does that mean? What does the sliding expiration mean?
That the time will get increased, like as you said.
Correct. Based on the last request received. That is what you mean by sliding expiration of a session. So all your answers that you're giving are a little, I'm a little shaken up. Right? One of you said that when the browser is closed, you won't know when the browser is closed. Someone else said when you log in and log out. Log in and log out is code that you write that has nothing to do with the session. All right. Now you can write code to programmatically end the session. You can write code to programmatically end the session. You could do that. But that does not mean that there is a button called login which automatically starts the session. Or there's a button that called logout which automatically ends the session. That doesn't happen. The session is started where? On the first request. So which is the first request? I think Kunal said login, logout, right? When does the session start? When you go to the login page, your session is started. Not when you submit the login page.
Yes, sir.
Kunal, are you understanding the difference?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Okay. Somebody
Yes, sir.
said when the last request is sent. How do you know that's the last request? And you know it's the last request.
No, sir.
How do you know is this Abhishek's last question? Do you know that this is Abhishek's last question? Yes, Abhi?
Yeah.
Would people know that is this your last question?
No, sir.
No chance, no?
No chance.
Yeah, keep it coming. Good. You're the only one who's keeping this session alive. Today's session, people were half dead. So thank you, Abhishek.
No
Sir,
problem,
what was
sir.
the term you used, like for like the expiry gets extended?
Sliding expiration.
Yeah, so we can say like Abhishek Singh is like sliding the session.
Don't use any expiration word with him. Abhishek, I'm very happy. Thank you, Abhishek.
Yeah, sir. No problem.
For the N2. All right. And keeping me going also in the session. All right. Well done. Okay. Yeah, are we clear about what is a session? How it is maintained? When does it end? When does it begin? What is all these timeouts and all these things that we have mentioned? Are we clear about all these concepts now? Or do we have any other question? All right. Now we come to the code part of it. Now that you understood what is a session, now we come to the code part of it. So what is a session variable? What is a session variable? A session variable is some data that is available throughout the whole session. When will the session variable be destroyed? When will it be destroyed? When will it be destroyed?
One particular time period will like over.
When the session ends. Say when the session ends. Now, when can the session end? One possibility is a timeout. Second possibility is programmatically you end the session. Third possibility is the server shuts down, if that website shuts down. So all the sessions that are open will be shut down. If the application shuts down, so that also will be shutting down the session. So these are the possibilities. All right. So let's go into the code and see these examples. Okay. So what we're going to do here is try an example with state management. Okay, so I have taken this one example where the first four options that we talked about, these are being shown to you. Okay. All right. Let's start with this default. Let's start with this. I'm storing some value into either view bag or view data. Can I use any one of them? It's going to do the same thing. Okay, whatever I'm doing with view bag is also accessible with view data. Only the syntax, the way in which you write it is different. So is line number 11 and 12, is it the same? Line number 11 and 12, are they the same?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So I've got something that is there in view data and temp data, and I return a view. So if I come back to the view and I try to print both are available right now. Okay. Whatever I have stored from the controller is available to the given into the view. So this is something that we have seen. This is something that you tried earlier as well. Right? So you had both these values coming. Okay. All right. Now, instead of doing a return view, what am I going to do here? Return redirect to action. So this will take me to where? Index 2. Now, if I do a redirect, what is available and what is not available?
SAM data is available, view data is not.
Right. So let's try this now. If I go to index 2, and if I try to print or try to access view data, this is going to give you a null reference exception. All right. So from index 1, from the first one, if you're doing a redirect, I'm saying the view data that you store here is not going to be available here. Let's try this. All right, and give you an error. What is the error now? Null reference exception saying what? That view data is not available. Understood? Yes. Okay, so let me comment out this. So view data is not available, but would temp data be available on a redirect?
Yes, it should be.
Right? So let's confirm this quickly. And let's run this, and temp data is available. Okay. Now, if I go to, I'm not doing that, but suppose I go to index 3, or forget about index 3. If I do this, what am I doing here in this case? Returning view. After which, if I send a fresh request for index 2, will it be available now? I've returned a view and I now go to index 2 with a fresh request. Will it be available or not available?
No.
Let's confirm that. So right now on index 1, it is available. But if I try going now to default / index 2, right? I go to index 2, you'll find that now this is the fresh request, second request being sent. You'll find that this temp data is not available. Was available in a redirect, but not available with the fresh request. Are you clear on this, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Questions of any with any of this so far? Clear? Okay, now I want it to be available across requests. So what do I do? To make it available outside across requests, what do I do? Store it into a session variable. All right. Now to store it into a session variable, before I can store it into a session variable, there are certain things that I need to do. So let's see what are the things that I need to do. The first thing that you need to do is you need to go and add this session. All right. Basically, what you're doing with add session is you're saying that enable this session service. By default, the sessions are not enabled. Right? Supposing you have a site where you can just go from one page to the other, you're not passing any values, they're all unrelated pages, then there's no need to maintain sessions. When do you need to maintain sessions? If you want to pass values between that, so there's extra information coming in, and for doing that, you have to enable the session. After you enable this session service, you also need to go and add this line which says use the session service. So far we have not done anything out here. We have not been using any middleware. We have not been, writing any code for that. But this is one example where we now need to use this. So first thing, what do? We add the session service. And secondly, what do we do here? We use the session service. Without doing this, your code will not work. Okay. Now, while adding the session service, there's an overload that I'm using. So this is by itself without anything. The same thing, builder.services.add session. Along with this, I'm specifying certain options. So what is the first option? Line number 18. That should be fairly simple for you to guess.
For timeout, like when the request after that not
right? The default timeout is 20 minutes. And if you'd like to change this default timeout, you could specify the time limit out here. So this would be now a 20-minute default value has been changed to a 10-minute value. Are we clear on this? So if 10 minutes, if there was no request that came in from Tarun's side, his session would have ended. Okay. All right. Tarun, have you understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now the request has come in from him at 6:57. So at least 10 minutes more I have for the session to end. At least 10 minutes more. Okay. Sliding expiration, remember, 10 minutes from the last response. Okay. Now there are other options here that we have setting. Cookie.htp only equal to true. Now this is referring to the session cookie. By default, the session cookie is not accessible in client-side code. By default, session cookies are not accessible in client-side code. So if you want them to be accessible for whatever reason, then you can enable them here. But not recommended. Ideally, session cookies should not be accessible in client-side code. Code should not be able to enable a session or disable a session or set some values out there. So how do you enable it? To enable it, you need to pass it a value of false. So by default, if you said HTTP only equal to true, it means it is only available on server-side code. But if you want it to be also available on client-side code, HTTP only equal to false. Right? They'll ask you all sorts of these sort of silly questions in the end module exam. Right? They won't ask you something that you are using frequently. They'll ask you something, absolutely like, a hidden thing somewhere you read something. These sort of questions will be asked. 1 mark question. How do you enable, how do you allow your client-side code to access your session variable? Session cookie rather. Okay. All right. Now this option here overrides the setting on the browser. If the browser has, for example, disabled session cookies, I could still enable them by setting the essential equal to true. Okay. By saying that I need a session cookie in my code, and the browser setting can be overridden out if you are using settings, the sessions. So these are some of the options that we're given in here. The earlier line would also enable sessions, but with no options and no default options given out there. Okay, so don't do both. Don't do 13 and 16, one of the two. After enabling sessions, after sessions are enabled, now let's go into the code. Now to access the session, you need to access an object here called as the HTTP context. So HTTP context gives you information about the current, the current context. So the current, request that is being processed is your HTTP context. And the HTTP context object in this example is using the session details, or I could even use it to, for example, HTTP context dot, not content, but context dot. I could, for example, find out details about the requests using this. HTTP context dot request dot. I could find out details about the request. Okay. Or similarly, if I wanted to add something to the response, HTTP context dot response dot, and I could actually add something to the response or specify something on the response. These are giving me details about this. Are we clear on this, everybody? In this example, we are using HTTP context dot session. And if you look at HTTP context dot session, right? This is a method out here called dot set. And this allows you to set a session variable. So what are the value that you can set? First thing is the key. So whatever, let's say key 1. And secondly is the value. Tarun, what is the value in here?
Here it's 10.
No, what is the value that it's taking on the second parameter? Here.
Sorry, byte and value. In byte array. Byte array.
Yeah, point to be noted that Tarun has sent a request at 7:02. So at least 10 minutes more, the session is alive. Okay. Right. So it contains a byte array. So whatever data you want to store now has to be first converted into a byte array to store the values. Now this can be quite painful to do. Any data that you want to store, every data you want to store, if you have to convert it to a byte array, that's not the easiest piece of code that you will do. Somewhere else we had converted to a byte array. You remember that? Where had we done that? converted it to a byte array. Where had we done that? When you're working with files and you're using streams, file stream you're using. So file stream required a read and write, required a byte array. So was not the easiest code that you wrote, right? So we're not going to use this option. We're not going to use the dot set option, right? The second option that we have here is you have two other methods with set. You have a set int32 and a set string. What is set int32 doing? What is this like saying?
They're taking string as key and taking integer value as value.
As 10, right? 7-4 is the last response. I'm just saying that at least 10 minutes more the session is active. So anyway, so key is what? Key is A and value is 10. It's like saying, you know, viewback dot A equal to 10. Instead of saying a viewback dot A equal to 10, we're saying what? We're doing this for the session. But we are setting an integer value. Key and value. All right. The second thing that we can do is instead of setting an integer, we could also set a string. So this is like doing a viewback dot B is equal to ABCD. But only thing you're doing it for a session. Are we clear on these two methods? Everybody?
Yes,
all right. Now give me the reverse. What will we do for reading the value? This is for setting the value. How will you read the value?
Get int and get string.
Okay. So that's 7-5 again. Good. So get int and get string is what we are using out here to read the value. So exactly the reverse. Now get int 32 returns a int question mark. So what is the int question mark? Is
It's
a
nullable.
nullable thing because it could be a null value. We don't know whether it returns a null or not. So if you are confident that the value is definitely there, you could check for what? Dot value. So this here, whatever you want to check for what is not there. If this returns a null, that means the value has either not been set or the session has expired and then the value has been destroyed. Okay. So this is the exact opposite. Now these are the only two methods that you have. You either have a get int32 or a get string. No other method is available. So what if I wanted to store a decimal, for example? Now I'll have to convert the decimal into a string. Or what if I had to store, let's say, a Boolean value? Boolean value also convert to a string. Because the only two methods you get are int and string. Set string and get and set int. So what if I want to store an employee object out here? And I wanted to store this employee object into a session which I can then access later. In some way, I'll have to convert this employee object into a string. So you have two options, either convert it to a byte array or convert to a string. Converting to a string is easier. And to convert to a string, can you explain to me what line number 31 is doing? Line number 31. Can you figure out what line number 31 is doing?
Creating a JSON file.
Not a file, but a JSON string. So this here, JSON serializer, here is system.text.json.json serializer. This class takes an object as a parameter and returns a JSON string. I'll repeat, takes an object as a parameter and returns a JSON string, which is basically your object being serialized into a JSON string.
Yes, sir.
And after which, what am I doing now? What am I doing now here? After I got my JSON string, what do we do next?
Key is EMP and value is JSON.
Is the JSON string. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm converting my object into a string, into a JSON string and storing that string. Okay. Which I could have done in one line here. This line here, number 35, is just combining lines 31 and 32. Okay. Give me the reverse process. I want to read the value. I want to read the value from the employee object. Give me the reverse.
JSON deserializer.
Correct. So first thing is, instead of set string, you will do get string. Now get string will give you the string that is there in the session variable. Correct. Now this
Yes,
is
sir.
in the form of a JSON string, and the reverse process, instead of serialize that object, you deserialize the string. So you deserialize the string to get the object. Here you are serializing the object to get a string. Later you will do the exact reverse, which is what? Firstly, get the string and pass the string as a parameter to deserialize it and get an object. Are we clear on this, everybody? So that's how you would, store objects into a session variable. Otherwise, what other options you have for storing into session variable? What are the two options that we are having? One is storing an integer or storing a string. Or other,
Or set.
absolutely, longish method, convert
Byte array.
everything to a byte array. Are we clear on this, everybody? So this now I'm storing it in the first request. I'm storing this value in the first request, and I'm reading the value in the second request. I'm reading the value in the second request. Are we clear on this, everybody? After reading this value in the second request, what am I doing in this example? What am I doing on line 48? Come on.
Storing it into a view bag.
Storing into view bag, which I can now access where?
To view.
Where can I access it? From the controller into what? Into the view. So I have passed it from the first request to the second request, and then from the second request from the controller to the view. So if I showed you the view, this is the second request, session 2. What is this doing out here? Viewbag.name. All right, let's try this. So what am I storing in the first one again? Look at this. What am I storing in the first one? I'm storing A, B, and I'm storing this EMP object. Now I'm reading the EMP object. I can also get the values for A and B also the same way, but I'm storing the EMP object and showing you the name out here. Name, initial name was of course my name, which is now being printed on the second one. Let's try running this. So here in this case, instead of action as index, I'll take this as session 1. So values are being stored in the first request. Right, values are being stored in the first request, and this is only storing the values, and default / session 2. This is the second request being sent. In the second request, the value Vikram has been picked up. Are we clear on this, everybody?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, let's look at the code a little bit more in detail. What strategy did I follow here? I followed it wherein I'm passing it to the controller. Controller is reading the value, and from the controller, I'm sending the value to the view. Now, what if the value had to be read in the view directly? What if the session variable that I'm creating here, this variable here, had to be accessed in the view directly? What will the view need to do? What will the view need to do? It will need to access HTTP context dot session dot get string. Agree or no? This code I'll have to write in the view.
Yes, sir.
So if I go to the second view, and if I try to access HTTP context dot, you'll find that you don't get that HTTP context object here. If I had the HTTP context object, I could have directly done what? The same code that I have done in here, which is HTTP context.session.get string of B. But the problem is in the view, you don't have the access to the HTTP context object. So what do you want to do now? We want to in some way get an access to the HTTP context object. And to get an access to the HTTP context object, what you will need to do out here is a little bit of dependency injection. So in the view, I've added this line here which says @inject, @inject, an object of type HTTP context accessor. This HTTP context accessor will give you an access to the HTTP context. Once you have HTTP context, next what? Next what? Supposing I get HTTP context, then what? I've got HTTP context, then what?
We could access it.
Then we can access the dot session variable, the dot session object, and then call a dot get string on it. So this is how I'm getting it. So how do you add dependency injection in the view with the @inject statement? In this case, what am I injecting? The HTTP context access. Now this name can be anything. You can call it X. Okay, you can call it X. So whatever name that you're calling it here, that's the name that you'll refer to it in your code. Are we getting this, everybody? So I could have called it X and used it in this way. So X is of what type now? X is of what type? X here, the X variable is of what type? HTTP context accessor. And if you look at X dot, one of the properties there is your HTTP context. And then once you have the HTTP context, the rest is simple. All that we're doing is what? HTTP context dot session dot get string of B, directly getting the value. Are you clear on this, everybody?
Yes,
But I have not called it X. I've given it a larger name just to make it look good. You can call it X. You all are tired, end of the day, right? No need to type out the whole thing. Call it X, A, B, Y, whatever. Clear on this, everybody? For HTTP context injection, dependency injection to work, something else that I've also done. What have I also done? Added that service. Without this line, the @inject line will not work. So you'll notice now as we go along with little bit more advanced code, whatever services you need, whatever options you need will now have to be added by you out here. Otherwise, initially we're not adding this. Initially it was we're getting by with the default options. But now we need to add these. Are we clear, everybody? Yes.
Sir, line
Yes.
23, like what's happening here?
Sorry.
In line 23, what is happening?
This code is enabling this to work.
Yes, sir.
Right? So basic idea is what they're saying, that we will not initially only will not give you everything to you. We'll try to keep our application small. And whenever required, whatever you want, you add that service, you add that middleware. That is what we're doing. So later, not today, definitely. Today, if I do something, you'll throw something at me. But in the next session, we'll be looking at entity framework. So entity framework also, you'll have to first enable that service for it to work. So anything that you're using, you'll have to add that. All right, so on and so forth. Are we clear on what we have done here in the sessions? This code is accessing it in the server side. This code is accessing it where? In the view. And what is this doing now? Getting the value from B, storing into S, and lastly, what is this last line doing simply? Yes.
Showing it
Displaying the
in
value
view.
of that variable S. So what does that B store? What is B storing? What is B storing here? What is B storing? A string called
ABCD.
ABCD. Let's try running this. Okay. So slash default slash session 2 is able to pick up that string ABCD. Are you clear on this? All right. Now, I want to end the session by 7 o'clock. Okay. But Tarun has kept answering questions. The last time that he answered right now was at 7:18. So
Default time was like 10 minutes. So like
10 minutes,
7:20.
but it's an expiry, no? Sliding expiry. Every answer from you is increasing it by 10 minutes. Every answer from you is increasing it by 10 minutes. Every time you answered, Shubham would do, oh my God. All right. Yes, Tarun, understood what I'm saying?
Yes, sure, sir.
Okay, 7:20. Okay. Right? Okay, so let me end with one more last concept. I promise, last concept for the day. We'll need all of this. Otherwise, we're never going to finish otherwise. Okay. So last one, something that you'll enjoy. I saw Pratik having a cup of coffee alone, or tea. I don't know what it was. Right? What was it?
Coffee.
Coffee. So let us give something to Pratik along with the coffee. And what we're going to talk about here are cookies. Right? So one more state management option that we're going to look at is cookies. Suraj, madham mat hona. Okay. Cookies now. Cookies is a very simple code. Chalo, done. Done. 10-minute time. Now, Tarun, please don't talk anything for 10 minutes. Okay, we can end the session. Otherwise, you are extending the session. I'm not. So what is a cookie? What is a cookie? A cookie is some text information that you are storing on the browser. So typically, why use a cookie? If you want to retain the value, even when the session is over, you will store the value into a cookie. So supposing I store something on the browser, the user closes the browser and comes back tomorrow. The next day, after 2 days, his session is over, but his cookie is still there on the browser. Right? And typically, I'll give you an example where you're using cookies. If you, for example, if I go to Gmail right now, okay, if I go to Gmail right now, in this case, okay, if I go to Gmail right now, I'm not showing you what's in my inbox. I by mistake showed you what's on my WhatsApp. But if you notice, it's taken me directly into my inbox. It's not taken me to the login page. So why is it taking me to the inbox out here? And why not to the login page?
Your login information may be saved in cookie, and then by using that.
Correct. So that's what Gmail is doing. All the information that we have is actually stored in a cookie, username and password, right? 723. This username and password, when you go to the Gmail, website, it is now reading this information. If it is a valid username and password, is directly taking me to my inbox. Right? That's one thing that you could be using for cookies for. So storing my username and password on the site so that I don't have to now log in every time. Okay. Another example I'll give you. There's a match going on, India and New Zealand match going on. I keep checking the score very often. Right? So I keep going to this ESPN Cricinfo site. And not just there, there's a match going on right now between Mumbai and Maharashtra, Ranji Trophy match. Right? Now, matches that I follow often, ESPN Cricinfo keeps track of my information in a cookie. Which are the matches is this guy following? Which are the teams that this guy is following? And next time I log on to the site, those scores are shown first. Those scores. So user preferences also are being stored here in the cookie. Are we clear on this? Now, there are three major operations that you will do with the cookie. What are the three major operations that you'll do in the cookie? First thing is, the server will store a value into the cookie. So from the server, you're sending something to the browser. Which of the two objects will you use? Request or response? Tarun, think and answer.
Sir,
Which object would we use to store something? Yes. Was it for me or no?
sir, like when we want to store information, like we would get a request to get the object and then response.
No, I'm asking how do you store the value first from the server to the browser? What would we use out here? You can see what we are using. How is something being sent from the server to the browser? Using a
response.
So that is the first operation that we'll have. Writing a cookie, creating a cookie for the first time. Using the response. The response has a cookies collection. The response has a cookies collection. So whatever cookies you want to write can be written from the server to the browser using the cookies collection.
Yes, sir.
The second thing that you will do is when the browser sends a request, you might want to read the value from the browser. So the request also has a cookies collection. And to read a cookie, you will use the request object. Request object. So you have response to write a cookie, response to request to read a cookie. Right? Third possibility. What if I go to Gmail and I click on sign out? What will Gmail do with my cookie?
It will do nothing. Cookie will be there in browser.
It will delete the cookie. It will delete the cookie. If I do a logout, try doing that. If you go to Gmail and you do a sign out or a logout, and you come back the next time, you are asked to sign in again because it has deleted the cookie.
Sir, the server side also has like the power to delete the cookie.
Of course, how server is creating the cookie.
Yes,
Who's creating the cookie?
but is storing
Server is
in
creating
the client side.
It is storing on the client side, yes. So we are storing a value that will be available even after the session is over. But who's storing it? Server is storing it.
Yes, sir. Got it. Thank you.
Now, second, as I said, first operation, write a cookie. That's being done by the server.response. Second option, read a cookie, which is being done by reading from the request.cookies collection. Third option, server will delete the cookie. So to delete the cookie again, what option will you use? Request or response? Server has to delete it. Server has to send something to the browser. What are we doing again?
Response.
So these are the three basic operations that you will do with the cookie. Create a cookie using a response or cookies collection. Read a cookie using request or cookies collection. And delete a cookie again using response or cookies collection. All right. Now, Tarun, you better keep quiet. Now, 7:28, again, you have answered something. You are the one who is extending the session. I am not doing anything. I wanted to end at 7 o'clock. I am as tired as you all are. But Tarun keeps answering.
Sir, you keep questioning. That's why we have to reply.
7:29 again. It's 28 only. Luckily, ठीक है, चलो. 28 he is asked. You all are watching it. I am not responsible for this session extending. I don't want to take any more topics now. Tarun. You are receiving invitations for, they are going to have cookie parties with you. Okay, so back here. Now this is interesting stuff. This is very simple. I'm done. I'm really done. I'm not going to do more. There's very little code that's happening. So last 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes. Okay, I have a model. I'll explain to you what I have here. I have a model which contains some dummy data. So what am I actually storing? I'm storing like Gmail example. I'm going to store the username and password. So on the login page, for example, he will enter the username, password. He will log in correctly. After he logs in correctly, you have got the login details in this dummy data, and you want to store it into a cookie. That's the problem statement that I have. So where do I do this? I've got some views that I've created. Sorry, not home, but in test. So that's some views where I'm doing a create. So this is the the scaffolding for create. Details is showing me the cookie. So I'm displaying the cookie. And lastly, delete, as the name suggests, is doing what? Is deleting the cookie. 3 basic operations. Create the cookie, display the cookie, and lastly, delete the cookie. So let's look at the code for that in the controller. So let's start with create. So I receive this dummy data, right? And what do I do out here? What is this code doing? Look at line 45 and 46. What are they doing?
Creating a cookie.
Creating the cookie. So response.cookies.append is creating the cookie. When you say response.cookies.append, it's adding into the response.cookies collection. Whenever you send the response back, the cookie is going to be written on the browser. Where are you sending a response back? When you're doing a return view. Okay, cookie is getting created. Now, what is the name of the cookie? First cookie, what is the name?
My cookie 1.
Tarun 731. Okay, my cookie 1. What is the value in the cookie? Value in the cookie is coming in from obj.name. This is my dummy data that I have. And lastly, I'm giving the cookie option here. What option am I giving here? When does the cookie expire?
Every 2 minutes.
Not every 2 minutes. 2 minutes after it was created.
Yes, sir.
Creation time. Okay, I'll reduce it even further. Let's even wait for 1 minute. Okay. 1 minute the cookie is going to be alive. Are we clear on this? I've created 2 cookies out here like this. Give me the code for reading the cookie. Reading the cookie. What would I do instead of response.cookies? What did I now do to read the cookie?
Request.cookies.
Request.cookies. So that's my code for reading the cookie. I'm doing this in the details. So request.cookies of cookie name will give you this. Now there is a possibility that the cookie has either not been created at all, or has been created and has been deleted. So in such a case, what would happen now? If it has not been created or it has been created and then deleted, then the cookie would be null. So if it is null, what am I then putting in value out here into obj.name? What value is it getting? A null value. So just a string called null. Same code in the second one as well. and send that object to be displayed in the details. Clear on this, everybody? All right, so that's my code for displaying the cookie. Last one is easy. Last one is easy. I'm not going to tell you that. Delete the cookie. How will you do that? Delete the cookie. If to add a cookie you're doing response.cookies.append, how will you delete the cookie?
Request.cookies.delete.
No, darling, you cannot be request. It has to go from the server to the browser. The request is just reading the cookie. You want to delete the cookie. So will be what? Response again. You have to write something in the browser. So response.cookies. Instead of append, what are you going to do? Delete the cookie. While deleting it, you're giving the name of the cookie. Are we clear on this, everybody? Now, whenever your response is being sent back, it is deleting the cookie. So now keep track of the time. Okay, somebody keep track of the time. In my first code, I will create the cookie. So I'm doing that in create. I'm creating the cookie. Right? What came or no? I don't know why it's taking so long, especially when I'm in a hurry to finish. Okay. So this is my cookie. Got it come. All right. So let me create a cookie, whatever name Tarun and whatever the password. So let's say password is this password. So create the cookie. Now, how long is it alive? 1 minute. So somebody keep track of the time. Sorry? Finally. So around 7:36 and 10 seconds it was created. Now if I go to /test/details/1, it shows me that the cookie is there. Right? If I keep refreshing it, all right, it will keep showing up out here. Okay. The cookie is going to be deleted at 7:37 and a few seconds. I lost track of what time did I exactly do that. But as long as I'm, in that, cookie timeout, now I can keep reading the cookie. Are we clear on this, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So hold on. Sometime around 37 and a few seconds, cookie would be deleted. Till then, the cookie is alive, very much alive in cookie, somewhere now. So what happened now? At this point, values now were null after 7:37 and a few seconds. Clear on this, everybody? So that's how I have. Okay, why did I this thing? I wanted to show you a code for delete also. The second thing that I want to do here is when I create the cookie, okay, Vikram and whatever, let's say password is PQR. I create the cookie and let me go to /test/delete/1. So it's showing me the cookie and I can now explicitly delete the cookie. So I don't have to wait for a minute now. When I delete the cookie, I'm taking you back to the details page and you'll find that the value of the cookie is none. So these are the three basic operations that you'll perform with the cookie. Are we clear with how we have done this every right?
Yes.
So this is how you can, store a value in the cookie. Storing a value in the cookie is also another example of state management out here. Okay. So the other option that we had talked about here was what? Quickly. Cookies. right? Available or stored on the browser, available even after session is over, and would depend upon what? Would depend upon the timeout. Typically used for what? Storing user preferences, user data on the browser. Okay, so these are the 5 options of state management that we have seen. That is what I wanted to cover with you today. Okay, all right. Now Aniket kept reminding me that I have to give you all a project. I will share the project with you on day after tomorrow. The project will include state management, then whatever basic CRUD operations we have done with the model view controller, all the examples that we have done so far, data annotations. We have tried out creating a layout. We have tried have we tried partial views? I don't think so.
No, sir.
Partial views
No,
not done. No, I'll do that in the next session. So basically covering all the concepts that we covered till today and a few more, right? And a couple more would be there in your project. So I'd request you to please, if you have to do the project and complete it in a given time, if you know all these concepts well, you can do it in probably about 2 days. Right? If you don't know these concepts, then there's no way you can complete it in even 4 days. Or even a week or whatever. I mean, you can't complete it, full stop. If you don't know these concepts, the state management principle especially. Okay, so it's a mini project. I would expect you to do it in 2 days, but will be very difficult if you've not tried all this code. So I know you all are stretched for time. I know you all are, really being crushed from all sides, but can't be helped. Okay. All right. Tarun, no more words, please. I have to end the session. 10 minutes now. Tarun has not spoken. Don't speak. Don't speak. Don't even turn your mic on. All right. And we would have ended long back. This guy kept asking questions. 6:40. Remember, we started. 6:39 was his first request. 1 hour. This guy is just not letting me stop. Just not letting me stop. So anyway, I will see you all on the 26th of Jan, evening 4 o'clock onwards, right? So you have a little off time in the morning to finish practicing whatever, relax, sleep, whatever. But evening we will, sort of make sure that the flag is properly de-hoisted and all of that. We'll finish all of that and then we'll end the day. Okay. I don't know whether I'll finish the portion on 26. It's a tall ask. I'll aim to do that. Let's see how it goes. Bye for now.
Sir,
Thank
so
you. Yeah.
tomorrow we won't be having session, right?
No, tomorrow
26.
I don't have a session with you. Whatever is your other regular session,
Okay.
that would be there. But yeah, I don't have a training session with you.